Discipline. We all know what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about mother's shoe that she used to whack you with. The wooden spoon that grandma would sometimes smack you with. Dad's belt. The legendary twitch behind the woodshed. The paddle or the leather strap at school. These were all things that were involved in the discipline of a Gen X child when they got out of control. Yeah, we might have been feral and we might have been wild, but we were probably the last generation to truly be disciplined for our actions when we fucked around, because we are the fuck around, find out generation. First we fuck around and then we found out. And now when people fuck around with us, they find out. So let's get into this. I was going to talk about 3 separate times that I actually got a good whooping, and all 3 were deserved, as I said. So make no mistake, I don't look back at these at all as abuse of a child or overdoing it, that they were well deserved. I earned them, and it was very appropriate at the time. The 2 my father gave me and the 1 my grandfather gave me. So let's start with number 1, my dad. We were out skating one time at the rink, and I was wearing a bunch of hockey gear because I played hockey for a while as a kid. And I was wearing it, and for some reason, I can't remember why, but I got in this argument with this other kid as we were leaving the ice. I mean, we're now walking on, going to go take our skates off, and he said something to me, and I kicked him. I kicked him right near the crotch with my hockey skates on. And the second I did that, believe me, the motion of my dad grabbed my arm, spun me around, and all in one motion picked up a skate guard for my blades in his hand and whooped my ass. And I mean on the ass. Now, I was wearing padded hockey pants, so that skate guard was not abuse. That is what was needed in order to get the point across. Now, believe me, it really didn't hurt a whole lot, but the shock and the public display of it in front of all my friends and the other parents really put it home that you don't do that shit, no matter who you are or who you think the other kid is or how mad you were at them. It was well earned and it was well deserved. Now, the second one with my dad. We were out in the bush and we were looking for another good tree to make a new bow with, right? Because my old man believed that you had to learn to survive without society around you and without the government to fall on, because you couldn't trust them in the long run, that one day they will screw up so bad that everything will fall apart. Guess where we are? Anyhow, we were out there and we were looking for a new tree for a good bow. And I had my first bow and it was all right, you know, get a little distance, maybe get a rabbit with it. It wasn't much. And we're looking for shafts as well for the arrows. And I was getting pretty cranky. And I was sitting there and I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I got really mad at my dad. And he had just cut a nice piece of willow he was looking at that was perfectly straight for maybe making an arrow shaft out of, a good one. And we sat there and we're like goofing around, and I'm getting cranky and I'm getting mad and I want to go home. And he's getting mad at me because I have to learn this. I have to learn the skills to survive in the bush. And he's not going to let me just wind my way out of it and go home. I'm sitting there and I got cranked up enough that for some reason, God forbid, I thought it was a bright idea to take my bow, knock an arrow, and draw back and point it at him. Now, it wouldn't have done any real damage, and I tell you, if I let that thing fly, I'm pretty sure that the only person walking out of that bush that day would have been my old man, because he would have beat me into the next universe. But I drew back on him, and all I remember is him going, if you don't want it to be extremely horrible, and if you want to ever sit down again, you will put that bow down. And I put that bow down, and that willow that he had cut for himself, he let me have it with that. And I tell you, that drove it home again. Once again, that was a well-deserved, non-abusive beating that really got the point across, because what I did was super stupid and super dangerous. And just telling somebody they were wrong, or a little time out in a corner, or, oh, I want to validate your feelings, just wasn't enough for a situation like that. It was a whooping that I deserved and I got, and it was well earned. Now, here's the other one, number 3. My dad had to travel a lot for work, so he wasn't around a lot. So I spent most of my years until I was 12 raised by my grandparents. So I had some really old school discipline happening. You're talking, people who were raising their kids in the 30s, right? So I had some old school discipline with them. And they lived out of town. And they would go to town once a week. And that was it. Once a week to get supplies. And for them, that was a huge deal because growing up, for my dad and his siblings, they went to town maybe once a month to get supplies, right? Because you'd go in, you'd charge up, and once a year, you'd pay off your charge bill at the general store. Now, we're talking going way back here. So we were sitting there and we were going to town for our weekly trip to town. And when we'd go to town, and it would be an entire day. We'd get dressed up. We'd go early in the morning. We'd do some shopping. You know, we'd get our groceries. And on the way out, we'd stop at the one local at the time fast food restaurant in that town. And we would stop and we would have a treat, which was going out and having this meal at this major fast food chain. Now, we were going into town that day and I was being a little snot in the back of the car. Just didn't quite understand, you know, don't be an asshole. We were always that way. I was about 9. And we're going into town and I'm being a shit in the back of the car. Here we go. We're going along and my grandma's telling me to smarten up. If I don't smarten up, we're going to turn around, we're going to go home and we're not going to go to town until the next week, which meant we were going to run out of milk. We wouldn't have that chocolate bar, which she'd buy the caramel chocolate bar. And every day I'd get 1 square for a treat. You know, I wouldn't get that all week, things like that. Now I'm talking, this was old school living with them where these little things was a massive treat. You didn't do anything but be at home, work your land, and prepare for winter. So we were going to town, I'm being a shit, and she's telling me this, and you got to behave. And I'm like, no, and I'm not listening. And then we get into town, and we are in town. We are actually in front of this restaurant that we went to every day when we went to town. And we're in front and she says, again, you smarten up or we're going to go home. But I mean, we're in town. So I had to sat there and for some reason, my little smart ass little mind turned around and went, yeah, right. We're already here. Well, my grandpa never said a word. He slowed down and he pulled over on the main road in the town, stopped right in front of that restaurant, got out, opened the back door, pulled me out, dropped my drawers, and tanned my ass on the side of the road in front of everybody. Put me back in the car, sniveling and doing the like kids do when they get a good whooping. And I then got in, did a U-turn, and headed straight back out of town. And we went home, and we did not go back to town until the next week. That was the last time that I ever did not listen to anything my grandparents said, because that is old school discipline. You have to do it sometimes, even if it means punishing yourself, because you have to get the point across. I know damn well they wanted to go to town because they were out of creamer for the coffee, they were out of sugar for the coffee, and they needed to go. But they went without that for a week in order to teach me a lesson. And that's a lesson I learned, I tell you. And I thank every day for that time that I was with my grandparents, and they taught me hard-earned, old-school values that people just don't have today, like the younger generations. I've done my best to pass them on as best as I can, but they've changed so many rules and laws these days that you just can't quite do it the same. But you can. If you take what you learned and you tweak around a little bit, you can teach your kids. And now coming on, we can teach our grandkids that they have to be that way. That is a big problem with grandparents these days. Okay, my grandparents didn't spoil the grandchildren. Not like parents today where they spoil grandparents today spoil grandchildren so badly that they're actually worse sometimes when they get home than before they left, because they let them get away with anything, do what they want, give them what they want, and then they go home and mom and dad have to contend with them. So come on, grandparents. Instill some old school values in your grandkids. I know there's a lot of us out there that do with our children and our grandkids. Come on, Xers, we got to do it. We're coming on. We're taking all the positions. We're going to be the top generation soon, and we're going to hold on for a long time, because the simple fact is the reason we are the smallest generation in existence and is taking so long for us to get into the top positions is because medical science has advanced so far that fucking boomer generation is holding on to dear life and just doesn't drop dead anymore. So listen up, millennials and Gen Z. When you sit there and think that when the boomers are gone, it's going to be better because now you're on top, you're in for a hell of a shock, because it's going to be us. And we're going to install some old school discipline rules back in. I guarantee it. They won't be as harsh as what we had because laws already exist, right? But it's going to be that way. And we are going to come and we are going to fuck up your vision of what you think you can do, where you can sit around and do nothing. Now, before I continue on that rant, that was it. This was just a discipline, and tell them 3 stories of the 3 whoopings I got as a kid. And they were the only ones I ever got, because after that, I never pushed the line anywhere. It was not required to ever do it again. Because I was told if I do this, this is going to be the consequence. I listened. And that is what happens when you instill real discipline. You don't have to do it every day, and you don't have to whack on a child every time they turn around, because if you drive home 1 or 2 that are really important, they will then listen. All right, this is Drac saying I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye for now, and peace.